You're listening to All Things Sports with Mike Davis.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another podcast of All Things Sports with Mike Davis. I thank you for including my podcast into your day. If you're listening on Spotify, follow the podcast. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, comment, like, all that good stuff. Make sure you go to the Facebook page, get in contact with the show for comments or suggestions. I won't take up much more of your time. Let's get into it. All right, so the Atlanta Hawks, my Atlanta Hawks, are now looking for a new head coach. If you haven't heard, I'm pretty sure you have by now, the Atlanta Hawks have fired Lloyd Pierce as their head coach. Now, when I saw that headline, it said Lloyd Pierce was dismissed. I don't know why they put dismissed in the headlines and they say this on, like channels like ESPN, dismissed. Just say fired. He was fired. It is what it is, He's not the first person to be fired. And he definitely won't be the last person to be fired. But anyway, Pierce was hired at the head of the 2018 season and compiled a 63 and 120 record 120 record in 2+ seasons as the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks. So he was 60 and 123. Sorry, I am all over the place. 63 wins. 63 wins to 120 losses. So just looking at that just is weird. But so in two plus seasons as the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks, 63 wins, 123 losses. Now this year Atlanta is in the 11th spot. Yeah, they're the 11th seed in the Eastern Conference with a 40-20 record. They will play Tuesday night in Miami. Now the Hawks began the season 10-9, but they have lost 11 of their last 15 games. This is one of those things where it's tough. It's tough, Pierce, and not just Lloyd Pierce. First, let me just say this: as the Atlanta Hawks, if I'm the Atlanta Hawks. Well, let me just go on with my original statement. I'll come back to that. But, I do feel for Lloyd Pierce, but not just Pierce, but any other guys who come into a situation where they have to rebuild the team, because rebuilding is not the easiest thing. And chances are, once you finally rebuild that team, what you're coaching typically starts to fall on deaf ears. So teams start picking up just little bad habits here and there, and they start tuning you out a little bit. So organizations, they decide that we need a shakeup, and they will fire that coach who was there for the rebuild and bring in another guy. He'll get all the praise. You've seen it happen all the time. They can go to State. Golden State, Mark Jackson was one of the guys that helped build that franchise. For a lot of the young kids out there today that don't know, the 90s Golden State Warriors, we're not talking about your granddad's Rick Barry Warriors. I'm talking about your 90s Warriors after Mullins and Hardaway and Mitch Richmond. After that group had broken up, the Warriors were horrible. I mean, they had like a 10 to 15 year stretch where they were one of the worst teams in professional sports. No one wanted that job. No one did. Not a coach who was established. I know they had Don Nelson. I believe Don Nelson actually went back and coached them during the Baron Davis days. But you look at that situation, same thing. Look what happened. Mark Jackson comes in, helps rebuild that organization. What he's saying is falling on deaf ears, and there were some other things that I've read that, that's happened involving some extracurricular activities outside of basketball, fairs and churches, and you can go read up on this stuff on your own. But, there was some stuff going on in the background that kind of helped Mark Jackson get let out the door. But you saw Steve Kerr come in, and Steve Kerr was winning with Mark Jackson's players. Steve Kerr won championships with that team. And unfortunately, that's just how that's just how it is in sports, you know. I'm thinking of another situation. You look at Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, again, this is one of those situations where I want to say I've been watching NFL football since like the late 80s, early 90s, and from the I'll say late 80s. Now, I knew they sucked before that. You know, you can go back and read up on this stuff. But the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were horrible. Chris Berman on ESPN used to call them the Yuccaneers. You know, they were that bad. You know, and they finally got a head coach in Tony Dungy, who came along, brought that team together, made them into a winner, but they couldn't get over the hump. So here you have the guy who was here for the rebuild. They, you know, as they put it, dismissed the head coach, but they fired him. And then John Gruden comes over from Oakland, and he coaches Tampa to a Super Bowl, and they win it. I believe this is was it 2002 when that happened? It was early 2000, something like that. And, you know, Gruden wins with Dungy's players. And going through a rebuild as a head coach, it is tough because chances are you're not going to be there to kind of to reap the benefits. I mean, look at it like this. And it pains me to say this because I think this is one of the best head coaches ever of any sport. Phil Jackson. Yeah, Phil Jackson has coached a lot of superstars. But he's one of the best at handling personalities. And for those of you that don't know, well, you probably know now after watching The Last Dance. But remember, Phil Jackson wasn't the head coach when Jordan first got to Chicago. It was Doug Collins. You know, Doug Collins was the guy. And that's who Michael wanted because he put the ball in his hands. And, you know, during the rebuild, they got the guys. You know, you got Horace Grant, Scottie Pippen, all these guys come in. And it just wasn't, something just wasn't happening. It wasn't clicking. And, you know, they decided to go in a different direction and hire one of the assistants, who was Phil Jackson at the time. And Phil Jackson ended up going on to win a plethora of championships. So the rebuilding is very hard on coaches. Me personally, and people might think I'm crazy when I say this, if I was a head coach, well, let's say if I was an assistant coach and I wanted a head coaching job, I'm not taking a rebuilding job. I'm just not. I'm not going to do it. You are going to be the first person blamed when things don't work out. So I'm going to stay as a coordinator. If I'm coaching football or if I'm coaching basketball, I'm going to stay as an assistant coach. And baseball, I guess I'm going to be a positional coach, you know. But I'm just not going to take a rebuilding job. It's no fun. You're not going to get any of the glory if you finally get that team to, you know, where they want it to be. And unfortunately, well, Lloyd Pierce didn't even do that. I mean, the guy, I'm just going to be honest with you. Me being a season ticket holder with the Hawks. The guy I don't know what it is, but he's not that, he just doesn't have that coaching thing to me. Now, I've always heard that he was a great motivator, a great guy to coach guys up. And I've seen that. I've seen it with John Collins, because no one knew who John Collins was coming out of Wake Forest, you know. And I've seen that even with Trae Young. Now, Trae Young is kind of, I won't say he's regressed this season. I won't go that far, but there's something going on with Trae Young and John Collins. I don't know what it is, but I said that I had already said before the season, Pierce, I think, has done all that he can do for this organization. Now what's going to happen is you're going to need to get a guy in here who has NBA head coaching experience to teach X's and O's. I really think that's the problem because these guys keep giving away leads. And I know that seems to be an Atlanta thing. Atlanta's known for blowing leads. But the Hawks just keep giving away leads, and it just hasn't, worked out for them being 14-20. Management thought that this year would be a playoff year for them, and they can still turn around. They're in the East, and they're 14-20. They still turn the ship around. So they're going to now turn to Nate McMillan, who I'm not sold on either as a head coach. The man has coached 16 seasons in the NBA, coaching the one of the former teams he played with, the Seattle Supersonics, now the OKC Thunder, the Portland Trail Blazers, and the Indiana Pacers. Out of those 16 years, he's only had 2 50-win seasons. And I believe the last 2 years in Indiana, he got swept out of the playoffs. So I'm not really sold on McMillan, but at this point, it is what it is. He's going to be the interim head coach. He's going to be running things. I do think in this situation, I do think that it would benefit these young Hawks players to have a coach who has been there and who has coached a team to the playoffs, as opposed to Lloyd Pierce, this was his first time getting a head coaching job. And the only thing that sucks about this really with Lloyd Pierce is chances are he will not ever get another head coaching job. They're going to look at his record, and they're going to look at how he was fired in the middle of the season. And, unfortunately for black head coaches, it just, you get the short end of the stick, which is one of the reasons why I say I would not take on a rebuilding project. I just wouldn't put my family through that situation. I wouldn't put myself through that situation. So here we are. It is what it is now. The Atlanta Hawks, they move on from Lloyd Pierce, and they will try to right the ship with Nate McMillan taking over as the head coach of the Atlanta Hawks. So look, that's all I got for you today, folks. I thank you for including my podcast into your day. If you're listening on Spotify, follow the podcast. If you're on YouTube, subscribe, comment, like, all that good stuff. Go to the Facebook page to get in contact with the show for comments or suggestions. You've been listening to All Things Sports with Mike Davis. And remember, it's your world. I'm just giving my opinion. I'm out. Peace.
You're listening to All Things Sports with Mike Davis.